Hi, welcome back to another episode of From Dropout to JD. I'm your host, Adesua, and today we have a special guest. Say hi to Ross.
Hi, I'm Ross Partin. I just finished my 2L year at Ohio State University. I'm about to turn 26 here in a week. And when I was in undergrad, my second semester, I dropped out of college, and took about a year and a half to get back into it.
Okay. Why did you drop out?
Sure. So I graduated from high school with an abysmal GPA, and a fairly good SAT, ACT. I went to Bowling Green State University, which is north of my hometown by about an hour and a half here in Ohio.
Hmm.
Uh, in my first semester, took 5 classes and failed 4 of them, got a B in one of them, and was put on all sorts of academic probations. And so I just decided to leave during my second semester. I did so poorly because I simply refused to attend class. I just did not go. I spent pretty much every day hanging out with my roommate, my next door neighbor, and then going out at night.
That is so candid. Oh my God, that's so real. Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. When I started this podcast, I assumed there'd be more people who dropped out just because of being, I guess, irresponsible. But you're the first who that's been the case, which kind of makes me feel a little bad, but also it's my story, so I can't be mad at it. But so what changed? Like, where did you, yeah, I guess what changed between the first time and the second time you went to college?
Sure. Looking back, my roommate dropped out about a week before I did, and our next door neighbor had dropped out over the winter break. So we were all just kind of falling. Uh, and it made me look around and be like, well, okay, I messed it up this time. I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna take a break. I don't know what I'm gonna do after, but
Okay.
I really dropped the ball here. So I went back home with my mom, took up a job as a door-to-door salesman with True Green lawn care specialist. That was fine, but not great.
Hmm.
Was not a great time for me to be a salesman. I wasn't feeling, fantastic. So I ended up at Chipotle, which company I really liked
Oh,
working for, actually, and started to look around and think about how I could just change something because I was back in my hometown after having dropped out, and I felt like that wasn't working for me.
mhm.
I had a lot of family out west, and I just decided to completely upend everything, and I moved to Seattle. I lived with my grandfather for a while out there, and he was kind, amenable to whatever I wanted to do, but he knew I wanted to get back into school, and he lived right next to a community college, and so within 3 months of moving there, I was enrolled and ready to get started at Olympic College. So, what changed was I stopped, kind of realized that what I was doing was too little to succeed. There was a minimum amount of effort that I had to have, and I felt I could better achieve that if I just had a change in circumstances. So I moved across the country.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I also worked at Chipotle after leaving school, so that's really cool. But so you think like the new environment is what kind of shifted perspective, or yeah, like
Yeah, I guess I knew I'd wanted to go to school. Uh,
okay.
I like academic rigor. At that point, I thought maybe it's not for me. Maybe
Mhm.
I just, get my mental stimulation somewhere else. But I knew that was what I wanted to do, and I knew I had to find a way to get that. The new environment just helped me, like new home, new me. Uh, and it was away from all of the people who I had been out partying with, going out with, and the
Mhm.
people who I felt close to from back home. I could stay in touch with, and those who I didn't, I could leave behind. And I just had to make new friends out west.
Okay. And I'm curious, did you come from a background that was like super big on education? Like, were your parents upset when you dropped out? Like, what was that like?
My dad had always been very uh, serious about me going to college,
Mm-hmm.
but he'd also always acknowledged that I didn't have to.
Oh,
He had
wow.
gone to college. He was not the first in his family, but his father was. So my grandpa was.
Hmm.
And on my mom's side, I believe that I was the first to go to college, or at least, no, I was the first to finish college when I did many years later. I was not the first to go. So that side of the family, no, was not big on education. And my dad's side was very open to the idea that you don't have to have an education, but definitely wanted it. My
Mm-hmm.
mom, because no one on her side of the family had really completed an education, wanted me to. She thought that I could and thought that I should.
Mm-hmm.
And so disappointed, not heartbroken, not upset. I
Okay.
mean, upset, but not like enough to either cut contact or, stop supporting me. They were all very supportive the entire time. But I did not come from a highly educated family, so it wasn't a point of family prestige or anything like that.
Okay. Mine was a little different because my dad got his master's and he is an immigrant. And I don't know if you know about like the whole immigrant narrative, but they're really big on education because, this is a land of opportunity. But to get that opportunity, you need to have a degree, which is funny because I feel like nowadays you can be super successful being like a Twitch streamer or something. So, yeah, a little different in that regard, but it's interesting that so then who supported you through like school? Because I feel like that's a huge part of the journey is like having a support system help you. Did you have anyone like that?
I've always been fairly self-sufficient and solitary.
Okay.
Even in high school, I lived with my mom primarily up until the 10th, 11th grade. I moved in with my dad, and he basically was like, home by whatever time seems reasonable to you. Let me know.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want, explore your hobbies, your interests, and let me know if I can help out. So I've always been fairly self-sufficient. When I moved to Washington, I lived with my grandfather in a very small house. So I had him pretty much every day to come home to me. He's, retired. Uh,
Okay.
and then when I transferred from Olympic College to George Washington,
Mm-hmm.
I was again moving across the country from Washington State to Washington, D.C.
Oh,
And
word.
I didn't really have anyone out there. Uh, but the entire time we are, 21st century. So I have everyone who I had from back home, my close friends, my
Mhm.
current roommate and close friends since high school, my mom, my dad, my
Mhm.
grandpa, still just electronically rather than in person.
Right. Right. So why did you move from Seattle to I know why you moved, but like why did you switch colleges is what I'm trying to say.
Olympic College only has 2-year programs.
Oh,
I
word.
needed to go to a
Okay.
4-year program, and I was looking at where I could get in-state tuition.
Oh.
Uh, and so GW's private. Uh,
Mm.
and out-of-state tuition at University of Washington was almost as expensive as GW.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so the only place I could get in-state tuition because of a thing called Forever Buckeye. If you graduate from an Ohio high school, you're always in-state tuition eligible no matter where you move to.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
I was a Forever Buckeye, so I could go back to
Creepy.
Ohio if I wanted, but I thought that was way too soon. Um, so I learned about GW from a friend who was going there. They were about to start there, and I really had always been interested in international affairs. Seemed like a great program for that. So I decided on that because cost-wise, it was just as bad as going to the University of Washington.
Hmm.
Because I'd gone to Washington State and started an education right away, so you don't actually get residency time for that period if you're getting an education at that time. So
Oh, damn. Okay. That's so interesting. That's cool. I know someone went to George Washington. It's a really good school. That's really impressive.
it is a good school. I liked it. My GPA at Olympic College was better than any GPA I've ever had. I got a B in a coding class, and that
Oh,
was it. The rest were A's. I mean, like,
oh
I'm surprised
wow.
I did that to this day. I really not good at school. I very mediocre in law school GPA and then just an okay GPA at GW.
Yeah, so that leads me, I guess, to my next question. Where did law school fit into everything, considering what you just said about your relationship with school?
Yeah, so I like school. I like learning. I like
Okay.
researching. I am not good at it. I am not good at maintaining assignments. One thing I like about law school is that it is just the final exam.
That's true.
Uh, People don't like that. I love it. That's it for me. Uh, so law school was always on the plate, always an option, but I knew that with my academic history, it might not be easy.
Hmm.
I knew I'd have to do well in the LSAT. I believe that I did.
Hmm.
Uh, but I looked around at people who graduated with my degree from George Washington, and they worked at Deloitte. And I realized that I wasn't going to work at Deloitte my whole life. It's just not the kind of work that I could do, that I wanted to do. And then I wasn't going to get into the State Department because I'd done too many different drugs too recently.
What?
It's not even like bad stuff. They just like they're very picky. And
Oh my
Washington was a
God.
legal state. I don't know. Like it's they're very picky about your background check and how many years ago you have to have last smoked weed.
Oh my
And
God.
I was 21 in Washington State, and I'm like, I
Word.
am not going to, uh, I am not going to comply with the State Department regulations. So I have to do something else. And legal writing seemed very interesting. Research, litigation, competition. I've always been a very competitive person. I like a competitive environment.
Mm.
At GW, at Olympic College, I helped either found board game clubs or chess clubs.
Oh wow.
I like rules, and I know it's kind of silly to compare litigation to board games, but it's just the idea that I like having kind of a set standard of rules,
Mhm.
opponents, clear defined roles, and you're just trying to do the best you can in that position.
Right. So did you like the LSAT because of
I
that?
like certain parts of the LSAT, yeah.
Okay.
Uh, I used Khan Academy. Shout out to West Virginia University School of Law for sending me a promotional email saying, like, have you tried Khan Academy for the LSAT? I was like, no, I have not. And I did, and it was fantastic. I loved
Oh.
using Khan Academy for the LSAT. Uh, One thing that showed me was that for reading comprehension,
Hmm.
uh, I was really good at it when
Oh
it was
wow.
a science or history
Oh,
subject. And I was
okay.
really bad at it when it was culture, art. So whether or not I did well on that was just depending on if I was actually interested in the subject or not. And then logic games, logical reasoning, all fine. They're fun. I like logic games. Those were good. And the rest of the LSAT, it's just, learn the tricks to it and you're fine.
Right. Right. And that's what I've been realizing. I'm like 4 weeks into my LSAT prep course. It's going well. I'll give like a better update later on, but it feels like kind of what Elliot talked about in the previous episode, where she was talking about how it's kind of like setting for a math test where you just need to like keep drilling the problems over and over again versus like, I don't know, a humanities course. So I think after hearing that and approaching like that, I feel like confident that I can keep just practicing problems like over and over again. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
There's only so many different combinations of logic that they can
Mhm.
use, and at some point you've literally seen every style of question that they have, and they just
Okay.
repeat them, and you just learn that, and it's like it can come down to hours, just the amount of hours you want to put into learning that and finding that pattern.
Right. Okay. That makes me feel better. I want to go back a little bit. You said that you went to law school because you didn't want to go to something with like a D, like DeWitt or Deloitte.
Deloitte is a major
Deloitte.
consulting firm, yeah.
Oh, okay. It's a consulting firm. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
a lot of people in the GW kind of community make fun of it because so many GW grads go to Deloitte, and like
Deloitte.
working at Deloitte in the DC area is kind of a joke about you're selling out for the you're selling out for your degree. You got to pay that debt back, so you go to Deloitte kind of stuff.
Okay. Interesting. So because you were going to do Deloitte, you're like, let me just sign up for law school.
Yeah, I didn't really have that many job options. I could have gone to something unrelated to international affairs, and that's what
Okay.
law is. But
Right.
I always knew that this was something I'd be interested in, and a lot of the things people say you got to watch out for. in law school don't worry me that much. The biggest one, I guess, that does worry me is that, like, if you don't get good grades, you're not getting into big law. But
Oh, interesting.
it's yeah, some people like to pretend like you can get into big law with bad grades, but that's less than 1% of people who do. And even then, you have to have like decent grades.
Right.
But I would not have survived a big law anyways. I
Right.
am anathema to working 70 hours a week. I cannot do that.
Right. Yeah, I'm still torn on the big law thing because I also agree that I believe that you don't have to go to Harvard to get into big law. Like you just have to know the game well enough to like position yourself to get that opportunity with any job. And it's I want to know the legalities of working that many hours in a week. I think it's because of billable hours and like whatever that setup is, but it's just crazy that you really are working like 12-hour days and that's just the norm and they don't see that as like a health risk.
Or they do, and they're just like, hey, it's a health risk with a $30,000 bonus if I hit that
Right.
number, you know?
That's true. God. So you're not even a little bit intrigued or like by the prospect of making that much money and considering the debt you have?
At this point, I'm not in the running. Uh,
Okay.
I am. So Ohio State is best school in Ohio,
Oh, okay.
regionally decent school.
Okay.
There are a lot of schools in, Chicago that are ranked higher, University of Minnesota ranked higher, but
Okay.
regionally pretty good. I have a lot of friends going into big law around here. Jones Day, Voorhees,
Right.
uh, and they are all top 10% of the class, if not higher.
Mm-hmm.
And I am somewhere around the 50th percentile. I do better than about half the people I'm with. I do worse than about half the people that I'm with.
Okay.
And it's it's another one of those things where it's like really course dependent. Some
Right.
courses I do incredibly well at, and some I do very poorly at, and then they average out.
Okay. Damn, I love your candidness. This is such a great interview. It's making me feel better about the way I do school because I'm not a bad student. But I definitely just like sometimes there are certain classes that I get along with and some that I don't. And I like what you say, like I agree with that. Um, but I don't feel like good about it. Like I put a lot of pressure on myself to like figure out a new way of like doing this difficult thing that I am not good at naturally. So it's interesting to hear you just be like so like nonchalant or just like super definitive about it.
It's one of those things I've had to live with long enough that I've gotten used
Mhm.
to. There's always been some inconsistency with how I view my talents and abilities with where I am ranked in academic systems.
Mhm.
Like I considered myself definitely top 10 smartest people in my top 10% smartest people in my high school.
Okay.
I'd put myself in that range, despite having a GPA at high school that was in the bottom 40%. I
Okay.
understand that these metrics do not align with your skills and abilities.
Hmm.
Uh, and so the question you have to ask yourself is, given that failing, whether or not it's a failing of the system, given that mismatch uh, of the system to skills and abilities, are you still going to be able to do something that lets you use your skills and abilities to grow a career? And the skills and abilities that you have, can you grow a career off of that? And I
Mm.
think even though law school doesn't quite match up, the skill of being a lawyer
Right.
with your grade and GPA, I'm still going to be able to have a career here that is meaningful and successful. And I also think the skills that I have that don't match up with their ranking system are going to be ones that I can build a career off of. So
Right.
even though I am not weighted highly in the system of law school,
Mhm.
and I accept that and I've had to, and I just get used to that, it's not going to change at this point. The opportunity to change it is really long gone at this point, unless I Cali 4 of the 5 classes I just finished my finals in. Uh, it's just something I've had to come to terms with, and so it's not too hard to speak about. I know that's how it is, and I still feel confident moving forward.
Okay. There's like two questions I want to ask, and I'm trying to figure out which one I should ask first. I think what I'll ask is like if you're the first person I've interviewed who is like actively in law school,
Hmm.
so could you kind of share like what law school like your experience with it, what it's like? Can you like quantify it or at all?
Yeah, so I, in addition to dropping out of undergrad,
Hmm.
dropped out of law school with a leave of absence. It wasn't really dropping out. I was still on good terms with OSU the whole time. But 2019, I start. I'm feeling very good.
Hmm.
It's all those core classes. At OSU, you take con law your second year.
Okay.
So you actually get an elective your first year. It's usually kind of a
Oh,
fun
nice.
class. I take gig employment and employment law. Really like the professor, Rosa Jones. She's great. I have now taken multiple courses from her. There's no Labor and Employment Law Association here, so I start one.
Oh
I get a lot of
wow.
good people, and it's actually something I looked for at all the law schools. And then I emailed after I accepted at OSU, the guy who runs it, and he's like,
Hmm.
"I graduated like 3 years ago. I don't know why I'm listed. I would assume that means that it doesn't exist anymore if I'm still there."
Oh wow.
And so I was like, "Okay." So I kind of knew coming in, I want to do that. I get my grades back
Hmm.
in the middle of playing D&D with a bunch of my like law school friends, and I can tell, like one of them very happy, a bunch of them not actually checking. I try and continue on. I can't wait. I don't have that self-control. I see that I have incredibly mediocre across the board grades, except one very good and one pretty bad, which puts me just over the 50th percentile. We get into spring of 2020. Two
Right.
things happen. One unrelated to the pandemic. I ruptured my Achilles tendon playing soccer.
Oh damn.
So I am like undergoing surgery while trying to interview for these summer jobs,
Oh.
like in a boot and a cast. I ended up securing employment at a firm that I just left. They're fantastic, huge
Oh
fan.
yay.
Workers' compensation firm, a volume workers' comp practice in Columbus. I learned a lot. They were awesome. But then the pandemic hits, so now we're online, and I decide to ask that firm if instead of going back to school, they would take me on full time for the school year.
Oh.
Uh, and they'd never done anything like that, but they said, "Yeah, that sounds good to us." I went to the school, and they said, "Your scholarship is good for like 6 years as long as you complete all your semesters within that time." It might have been 6 semesters over 5 years.
Hmm.
So as long as you complete it in that timeline, you're good. You can take the leave of absence. We're being very generous with them due to COVID. So
Okay.
I take the year off. Uh, so I just came back from my 2L year. All my friends who I made 1L year are graduating right now. So I get to kind of see what they are going and doing, which is very interesting. But that did make my law school experience a little weird because going into 2L year, I really didn't know anyone
Mm.
who was in my class anymore. A lot of my classes were full of 2Ls who all bonded over their online 1L year. And I
Okay.
didn't have that. And I really, like, I don't know, I felt like I was left out of a lot of the jokes there, but I don't regret what I did. I got a lot of good experience there.
Mm.
Law school itself, I mean, it's reading and then joking with other people how you gave up on the reading and then scrambling to get outlines, trying to learn what that professor's style is,
Mm.
what their exams are like, and then trying to fit into it. It was different because my first year, it was 4-hour exams in person, time pressure was on, and that was intentional. Whereas this year, a lot of the
Mm.
professors have abandoned that style entirely. They're giving you
Oh,
8-hour take-home exams
word.
that they say are the same 4-hour exams, meaning they're abandoning time pressure as a concept. So it's been quite an adjustment. I find myself using 7 hours on almost all of them, nearly the entire new time. Some have word limits, some don't. But yeah, I mean, law school, fairly simple, and it can be fun. You do the reading, you show up to class, you got to show up, you got to be there. Try and participate. Cold calls, I've never had a problem speaking on the spot publicly.
Word.
So they're not a big issue for me. I understand a lot of people with a different experience with public speaking really
Mm.
hate them, and it makes sense. I I've had some cold calls where I'm reading out of the book as I'm being cold called to get the answer. They're always a little fun. Your heart's kind of racing. You're like, am I going to say something incredibly stupid because I did not read this, but I don't want to tell the professor I didn't read this because it's really awkward. There are
Okay.
times when like 6 or 7 people in a row are like, oh, professor, I'm sorry, I didn't do the reading for
God.
today. It's so
Damn.
uncomfortable. So at some point, I'm just like, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna see if I can just wing this. Uh, but yeah, I mean, so it depends on your professors entirely, their style, what they like, how they lecture, what their exams are like. But the substance of law school itself, you treat it like a 9 to 5. You know, you show up at the law school, you take your classes. In between classes, you read. Sometimes on the weekend, you read. And I feel like you can have a lot of life outside of it. It's really not too constricting, or I haven't found it to be. Maybe that's why I am in the 50th percentile.
Okay. Um, I have this like theory that school is like a huge waste of time, regardless of like where you go, unless you're like a writer going to like a writer program and you can like work on your craft. But even then, it's like, is it really worth all that money? So like when you worked with that law firm, are you learning things in school that are helping you do that, or is it like more on the job type of like learning?
The only thing that school really helped with for the law firm,
Hmm.
there were 2 points. One is just more writing. I mean, a lot of being a
Oh
lawyer
wow.
is writing at some point. So school just gives you a volume of writing. You take a legal writing class, appellate advocacy classes, trial classes, and exams. And between all of that, is just a huge volume of writing, and that can be incredibly useful because legal writing is a little different than most all other writing.
Hmm.
So that was very useful. I was not used to the legal writing style. And two, and this was just kind of fortuitous, there were just some issues that I happened to cover in my classes that then became relevant in the practice.
Oh, cool.
So I could be like, oh, we just went over this. I think it's like this. So specifically, Ohio changed its rules of civil procedure for state court, workers' comp, almost entirely state court.
Okay.
Uh, Pretty much everything. I never touched federal court. We have a small practice that does federal court in our firm, but I didn't touch it. So everything I did was in Ohio state courts. And in the time that I was there, they switched to have their pretrial rule 23, mirror the federal rule. So I was taking civil procedure, learning about the federal rules and pretrial procedures as Ohio was switching to those exact same rules. So that was super convenient because I was just like, actually, I know exactly what this is supposed to be like. So that was the 2 times school actually helped. Writing
Okay.
experience, and fortuitously, Ohio switched rules as I was learning it.
Word. Okay. Um, so I just got a timer saying there's like 10 minutes left. I do not know what that's about, but we have 10 minutes left, I guess. So hmm. So that's
So
interesting.
to take up on the other part of that, the work experience, learning on the job, was most of it, and I feel like taught me a lot more about the practice of law than anything else. I wouldn't have traded that for anything. I think that should have counted for a year of law school,
Hmm.
unequivocally. I like law school should be 1 year and 1 year of what I did. Uh, you don't need the bar exam either. I mean, honestly, like I think there should be a system where you can take the bar exam or go to law school, and law school should be 2 years, one of them in a
Oh,
classroom
okay.
and one of them as a practicum, or 3 years, 2 classroom, 1 practicum, then no bar exam.
Right.
I think the bar exam and law school is redundant. I think law school is mostly pointless, and I think it should be 2 years with a practicum rather than 3 years of in-class education where you, I don't know. I mean, if you want to be a professor, it makes sense, but get an LLM if you want to have that
Right.
system. You know, that makes more sense to me.
Right. Even as you were saying that, I agree with all that you're saying. But then I'm like, I also do like the classroom environment where you get to like bounce ideas off each other and like have a discussion over topics. You can't really find that outside of the academic, environment arena. I don't know. Um, so I'm looking forward to that because I just like intellectual stimulating conversation. So I think I want to throw that in before people think that I'm just so anti-school. There's more to it than that.
I have to agree. I mean, that's why I've always said I like school despite being bad at it. The actual in-class participation part is really fun. You know, you're talking to a
Okay.
lot of really smart people. Getting into law school is not easy. You have to have some skills to do it. I mean, you're gonna find people in your law school class who you're just like, oh, that guy's not that smart. But you know what? He actually really truly is. To get there, he's at least got some amount of talent. And even though
Mm,
compared to all these other brilliant people, they don't shine.
okay.
It is a lot of fun conversations with a lot of really clever people.
Okay. Word. That's true. Like I'm experiencing right now all the hoops that I'm jumping through just to get to I don't know where, to do I don't know what, but
I see you've got
yeah,
your Duke Law sweater on. Where are you
yeah.
looking at?
My sister is going to do law. So I got
Mm,
this when we visited. And like also when I visited with her, I kind of fell in love with the school. But my grades are trash. But at the same time, I have a really impressive resume. I just got accepted into a congressional caucus internship, which is in DC, which I'm leaving for in 2 weeks, which honestly listed on Reddit as a T4 soft, which I don't get, but Reddit, it seems just like a cesspool of bullshit. I don't understand half the stuff that goes on those forums, even though this is the it was that's how I've made connections with all my guests. So I guess I am a little grateful to Reddit. But to circle back, yeah, I do want to go to Duke Law. Yeah. But realistically, like I guess my oh no, what happened? Okay, whoops. A pop-up came up on my screen. Miami Law is something I feel like I could get
mm.
into, that I'm interested in. I like the location. I feel like I could live there as an adult. I would love to spend time on the beach. I feel like that would make school more interesting for me, even though that's shallow, that's true. California, maybe it's just really expensive, but I could live there. um I'm going to DC and I might be moving there permanently, so if I do that, I was looking at George Washington, which is funny that you mentioned that. um did you like, is Ohio cold? Like, were you able to deal with the winters?
I grew up here. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, so that was no issue to me. It does get cold here.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I mean, if you're from Texas, you're probably gonna complain. I've got a good friend from law
Yeah.
school. He's from Florida. He's moving back to Florida immediately. He's graduating now, so he's probably gone within a week. Because yeah, as a Southerner, he was not a fan of the Ohio climate. Yeah.
No, yeah, I don't like I don't like it. I don't get it. It makes me grumpy. I feel like it makes other people grumpy and they're not aware of it because they're so used to it. But when I lived in New Jersey, everyone there was just on edge, like low key miserable, high key miserable. It's just a trash environment. Even though I made some good connections and the people, like not everyone's terrible in New Jersey. Y'all have the shore, so like I'll give y'all that. Um, but yeah, what else would you consider? Like, what do you think people should consider when looking into law schools besides location?
So if you're looking into law schools and you have an area of law you want to go into,
Hmm.
looking at their rating for that, it's not going to be huge, a huge factor. I mean, your biggest factors are going to be ranking and cost. As much as people, I find people really like to dance around subjects like that, but the ranking is super important. Law is a
Mm.
prestige-based field. As much as I personally disagree with that, as much as I really don't like the way that people judge other people based on the ranking of your law school, there
Hmm.
are firms that will never hire an associate outside of a certain ranking. Years down the line. I mean, there are firms who care about your grades years into your career.
Wow.
It is just absolutely astonishing to me that they do that, but it's just true. And you don't have to worry about it. You get to pretend like it's okay when you have good grades or go to a good law school. Uh, but I think it's absolutely insane to go to people who are looking into law school and be like, "Oh, don't worry about it that much." But I mean, if you go to a tier 3 law school and it's
Hmm.
absolutely free, it still might be worth it. I mean, getting a bar, like, getting barred in a state is huge. And if you do that for
Right.
free, if they're paying for your room and board, if they're paying, it still could be worth it. But that's why it's rating versus cost. That's going to be the primary consideration, in my opinion.
Okay. Rating versus cost.
All of
So,
my, sorry,
mhm,
all the schools that I got into were in a similar rating range, and almost
mhm.
all of them gave me a similar financial aid package. OSU was in the middle of that pack, and the cheapest. So I got to throw in the extra factor of I'm coming home after like 5 years. So my mom's super happy with it. So
Mm.
OSU did have a little boost of something that wasn't ratings versus cost, but that's because otherwise all the schools I got into evened out.
Yeah, I have a little sister who I love and adore, and I told her I'm moving to DC, and she was like so upset. She was like, "You can't leave. Like, Dad says you can't." Dad didn't say that, but that even now I'm getting emotional. But I definitely think that family is huge, so that's something I think I need to start thinking about as well. We have, I think, 2 minutes left. Is there any advice you want to give to someone who had a similar dropout experience to you?
Yeah, it's learning to deal with the things that made you drop out in the first place can be very difficult for someone who dropped out due to just like goofing around rather than serious medical issues or anything. Uh, I find that you really can't dwell on the fact that you dropped out. You can't let that be an impediment to yourself moving forward. It's about looking at that next step and that next step only. You don't have to view yourself in a grandeur, with a sense of grandeur. You don't have to view yourself as a one overlying arc. You can just say, all right, the next thing I got to do to get back into school is apply. Next thing I got to do is finish this assignment. Next thing I do is sign up for the next classes. It's only one step ahead. One step's very easy to take. You don't have to look at the whole big picture all the time. You will overwhelm yourself in that kind of situation.
Word. And we have 1 minute left. And usually I ask, do you regret anything? But I think a better question would be, how did you approach your academic addendum since you didn't have like a medical reasoning for
After we
it?
talked about this, I went and looked into it.
Okay,
Uh,
word.
and it's literally like 3 sentences. It's like
Oh.
I had really bad grades. They're carrying down my GPA. Those bad grades were a result of negligence that you'll see. I didn't say negligence. That's where they were a result of very poor decisions that you'll see I have stopped making and do not continue to
Okay.
make. That was it. I kept it as short and sweet as I could. I could send you it, and it
Okay.
really just based on the advice of all the people I was with, as minimal as possible because I don't want to be like I did drugs and
Oh. Okay, respect. Well, thank you so much, Ross, for this conversation. This was super enjoyable. I really appreciate it.
and thank you. It's a very interesting podcast, and good luck with your law school search.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.